but we have a very special guest with us. He's not going to show his face, okay? But he's got great initials. You know, the initials are ME for like medical examiner, but this one stands for my friend Mark Epstein, who I've come to know through Michael's work, as I just disclosed right off the bat. Michael was hired by Mark to attend the second autopsy of Jeffrey Epstein and give Mark the information and advise him. And, you know, Michael has been on the airwaves giving his conclusions. And I even have, when we get to it, what Dr. Banerjee is going to be on later, a prop of 4 times the size of a male Adam's apple. You know, a female, I guess maybe this is 6 times my size. I don't know. It's big, okay, but it's a prop, okay. We'll talk about that later. But Mark, we are so excited to have you on the show because you're the man who is seeking the truth.
Yes, I am. One correction: Dr. Biden was not. There wasn't a second autopsy. He was
right.
Autopsy.
It was the original autopsy. You're absolutely right.
Which was done by Dr. Roman, the city pathologist, and Michael Biden was there to witness it for me. Yes.
Right. You're absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. As usual.
Well, so, I try to stick to the facts because there's a lot of people out there speculating, and I don't want to do that.
You know that I appeared on another network this morning talking about your brother's death, okay? Given the 2-page report that was released, very interesting report with the opening line, as was pointed out to me today, says, as part of our commitment to transparency, we will show you nothing. We will give you nothing.
It's perfectly clear we're showing you nothing. That's how transparent we are.
Yeah. So I know there's a lot of points that you want to hit and we want to talk about. So we'd like to let you start, and then we want to show you some video that I think we'll be interested in.
You want me to start with?
Yeah, Mark, I want you to start because there's a lot of secrecy and cover up in my opinion. And I have a different, remember, I'm going to advise everybody that I'm my own person. I'm not my husband's person. Anyone wants to try to tell me what to do, and you can even ask my husband on that, that ain't going to work, okay? So I've gotten interested in this case. I think that there's a lot of problems, but I want to hear some of the issues that Mark thinks are more important, what he has been seeking for years now and cannot get.
Yeah, one of the things is what they call the PCR. It's the pre-hospital care report that's filled out by the EMTs and submitted after every call they make. It's part of their routine. And I was told I should see it because there was something in there about Jeffrey that I should see. And I haven't been able to get this report. I tried it with a FOIA request. I couldn't get it. So I actually went to the fire department headquarters downtown Brooklyn to where they keep these records. And I have this on videotape. I kept my camera running. And it does not appear in the system. The call at the fire department, we know the fire department EMTs were there because we saw them in the photograph when they were taking Jeffrey out of the prison and he was intubated and they were squeezing the air balloon to try to make it look like he was still alive. So we know the fire department EMTs were there, but there's no record in the system of that call. I also can't get a copy of the 911 call. Like, who called the 911 call when they found Jeffrey dead? And also other questions like why was he intubated? Why were they trying to squeeze air into him when the autopsy showed that he was dead for a minimum of 2 hours before he was found? So he was found, and now when they're taking him to the hospital, that's another hour later or so. So he's been dead for 3 hours, and they're trying to make it look like he was alive. For what purpose? Also, I have a photograph of him in the hospital on a gurney, dead, wearing a hospital gown. So someone decided to dress this dead body in a hospital gown, putting his arms through the sleeves and ties in the back. Usually dead bodies are in body bags or covered by a sheet. So who was running the show? That's why I'd like to see the video, the extended video of what they just showed of when they took Jeffrey off the tier and who was the last person on the tier when they locked it up. I want to see that footage from that camera from 10 o'clock on the 9th till noon on the 10th, because it would show who was there and who took Jeffrey's body off the tier. And like I said, who was running the show. I can't get that information. We're also trying to find out who were the other inmates on that tier. There's only, I think, maximum of 14, so it's not a huge number. And I'd like to find out who they are, when they got there, And where are they now? Because a lot of those inmates were transferred out after Jeffrey's death. So was somebody planted in there to kill him and then transferred out into the ether? So we can't get a record of who those inmates are. There's got to be. The records have to exist, but we can't get any of these things. And if this was clearly a suicide, as they're trying to claim, why the charades? Why the secrecy? Why not the transparency? This has been anything but transparent. I asked for that videotape, which would show from the night before till the afternoon, and I was initially told I couldn't get it because it was an active investigation, and I understand that. But after the investigation was over, years later, I asked for it again. I was then told, and I have this in writing from the Bureau of Prisons, that the videotape that I was asking for, the cameras that were working, don't show that area. Okay, and this is Bill Barr came out after the death and said he personally watched the videotape and he saw that nobody went in or out of the tier. He saw the tier door in the camera. That's the videotape I'm asking for, and I was very specific about it. And then they were telling me it doesn't exist. After telling me I couldn't get it because it was part of an investigation. It just doesn't pass the laugh test. That none of this is transparent.
And also the video that they are releasing, none of them show Jeffrey Epstein's, your brother's door, right, to his cell. None of them. We haven't seen one, right?
That they had the cell doors. It's not. And now it's questionable. Is that the tier door that they showed in this recent video? I'm not even sure if that's the tier door.
No, it's almost useless, and we'll go into it in some detail after we get a chance to talk with you a little bit more. But I have this question for you, Mark. With all of those questions in your mind, and then you hear there's going to be this release of information, what were your hopes? And I'm pretty sure what the realization was, but what were you thinking you were going to get and learn with this latest release of information?
Well, the release of information that they spoke about with the client list, is that what you're referring to?
Well, I mean, anything regarding the death itself. The client list, that's a whole other issue.
Yeah, good, because I'm only interested in the death. The client list and the case against him, I'm not concerned about that. I'm interested in his death. Well, I thought they would show something that happened. Look, when I first heard that Jeffrey was dead from an apparent suicide, I just accepted that as fact. I had no reason to doubt it. You know, he was potentially facing a long prison sentence. But then after the autopsy, when Dr. Roman, who was the city pathologist who did the actual autopsy with Dr. Bodden there witnessing it, they both came out of the autopsy saying they couldn't call it a suicide because it looked too much like a homicide. And then a few days later, the chief pathologist, Barbara Sampson, determines it's a suicide. She has yet to explain how she came to that determination, bearing in mind she never saw the body. She was not at the autopsy. So how could she then override the collective decision between Roman and Dr. Bodden that this looked more like a homicide? It just does. Again, it baffles the mind. It leaves a very big question. What was her basis of that determination?
Has she ever picked up the phone and spoken to you? Has she ever picked up the phone to call you?
Barbara Sampson, no. I try to contact her. She doesn't respond. She doesn't respond to phone calls or emails.
Even as a member of the family, you were still a member of the family, regardless of who it is. And the medical examiner's office didn't even try to contact you or respond to you in any manner at all?
No, they didn't. I mean, I've heard, the Justice Department report, which is filled with a lot of crap, they said that they notified the family after the death. Now, I'm the only family. There's no other heirs. Jeffrey had no children. Our parents are gone. And they didn't notify me. I learned that Jeffrey was dead on CNN that morning. That's how I found it. So they didn't notify me. So
on CNN? Seriously? You were watching TV and that's how you learned?
I was in Norfolk, Virginia, at a hotel having breakfast, and CNN was on the screen. And it comes across that Jeffrey Epstein was found dead of an apparent suicide. That's how I learned.
Holy moly. That even makes it, to me, even worse with regard to it. Has anyone ever told you who was... Now, Jeffrey was moved from his cell to the infirmary. Have you ever been told there's videotape of that, or there's anyone taking a phone camera or anything?
Yes, I was told that in the infirmary and all the way to the hospital, there was somebody with a handheld video camera. And I was told by somebody on the scene that somebody had a handheld video camera. And where's the tape from that? Can't get it. Haven't seen it.
And how about phone video? I mean, everyone walks around today with our phones, right? We walk around with our phones. I mean, we've seen it in every single case. People are taking a phone. No one even said they were taking video of a phone. No one came to you. Has anyone come to you? Did anyone actually come to you personally, call you personally, to say, we want to talk to you about what we found before they released this last finding of information?
No, absolutely not. No. I mean, people have contacted me through the years to try to extort money out of me. They're telling me they have information. All I got to do is send them bitcoins. You know, the typical nonsense you would expect in a situation like this. But no official has ever called me about it.
Oh, wow.
So Mark, with all of these questions that have been circulating for so long, and now we hear from the Department of Justice, it's a done deal. We're done. We've done all we can do. What's the next step for you? Where's your justice?
Well, I'm giving information to people like yourself who have maybe the ability to investigate this further, to push harder, because I can't do it as one person. It's hard. And there are other people trying to investigate this. And people don't want to leave this alone because it doesn't pass the laugh test. Anybody who has looked at all of the information, because a lot of people just look at one little bit, and they don't know what to make out of it. But the people that have seen a lot of this information, or most of this information, come to the conclusion that this was a suicide. And if you look at the people that are covering it up, you got Bill Barr first made that ridiculous statement that nobody went in or out of the tier, and that convinced him it was a suicide, even when there was other people on the tier that could have done something. I mean, it's such a naive statement from the top law enforcement guy in the country. That's a joke, and then you get Pam Bondi doing a thing. Then you get Kash Patel saying, in the congressional hearing, he's saying that, he's a prosecutor, and he gives a list of his credentials, and he says, a suicide when you see it. And I question, how many suicides has he seen? What makes him an expert on suicides? Is he a pathologist? Is he a medical doctor? I even joked, I said, does he have a Boy Scout first aid merit badge? I mean, what's he basing his expertise on? It's obviously bullshit. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Dr. Bodden has done about 500 autopsies on prison deaths. And I don't know how many Dr. Roman has done, but I'm sure it's more than one. So what's Kash Patel's expertise here, where he can clearly state, a suicide when you see it? And he didn't even see it. He never saw the body.
He saw pictures. That was it. He saw pictures.
Yeah, and if you look at the pictures, it doesn't look like a suicide. If you look at the mark on Jeffrey's neck, it doesn't look like somebody who was hanging by the neck. It looks like he was more like strangled. And there's questions of lividity on the body. He should have had lividity in his legs from the way they said he was hanging, and he doesn't. There's just a whole lot of things that don't add up.
Yeah, it's unending. So why do people want to believe that he killed himself, Mark?
Well, I don't know. Well, normally people like to believe what they hear. That's just a human trait. So people hear things, and unless there's something to tell them otherwise, they believe. Look, when I first heard he was dead from an apparent suicide, I believed it. I had no reason to question it, right? I mean, it's a possibility that someone in that position might commit suicide. But then also I found out afterwards that he had a bail hearing coming up to appeal his bail. And if he got bailed, he'd be out. He'd be living in his home awaiting trial. So why would he kill himself, days before a bail hearing? I could understand if they had the bail hearing and he was denied bail again and he chose not to live another year in jail, before a trial, then take yourself out. But not before you have a chance of getting bail. That doesn't, I knew my brother, that doesn't add up.
Right. And we're going to, by the way, talk about those marks. We do have, I showed it to you, but we'll go through it with Dr. Banerjee when she's on. Here is 4 times the size of a male, the neck, the Adam's apple of the neck. And here is the hyoid bone, which is going to be here. It's a little smaller. And let's see, thyroid cartilage that we talked about earlier today when I was on Julie's show over here. And so these 3 bones are all fractured and all have hemorrhage under them. And we'll go through this a little more with Dr. Banerjee. And so that is very unusual, as you know, Mark, right?
Well, the thing is, it's very unusual. Dr. Bodden said that he's never seen 3 broken bones like that in a suicidal hanging of this nature. I read a report from the Philippines where they were investigating broken bones in the neck from suicide. And they talk about a potential break or 2 breaks Never heard of 3 breaks. Another thing, another possibility for the 3 breaks, if someone's being killed by like military, a lot of times they'll get a karate chop to the neck, which crushes the neck and incapacitates you. It also prevents you from screaming. And then in the military, like you see in the movies, they'll hit you in the neck and then, you know, twist your head and break your neck to kill you. But in this particular case, he might have been hit in the neck because a karate chop could cause that damage to his neck, and then strangled.
And then staged. Now, you mentioned that there were other detainees on the cell. Have you ever seen any written interviews of those detainees? Have you been told who they are? Have you been told why they were moved out of the area? Has anyone ever told you that from the law enforcement?
Oh, there was one guy named Reyes who was Jeffrey's roommate for a while, and I believe he has passed away since. That guy, Nicholas Taglioni, was on the tier. You know, Jeffrey roomed with him for a brief period of time. And he's the one that roughed Jeffrey up, supposedly, when they thought Jeffrey tried to commit suicide prior. But it turns out that he got roughed up. So I don't know who the other inmates were. I can't get that information.
They won't give you that information at all.
And there was no record of interviews with them in the Justice Department report. I don't recall seeing that.
Yeah. And then one other question before, I know Michael wants to play a little bit of an interview, a tape for you. In the report, you said, besides the guards that fell asleep, that were disciplined, that were indicted, blah, 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 that for 11 hours, Jeffrey wasn't checked on as he's supposed to be. There's an unnamed guard number 1 and an unnamed guard number 2. Do you know, first of all, if they're really guards and who they are?
Yeah, we don't know that because, you know, Michael Thomas and Tova Noel are the 2 guards we know about that got in trouble for, you know, not doing their reporting. We also know that Michael Thomas came on shift in the middle of the night. So he wasn't there at 10 o'clock. It was 10:30 when the tier was locked up for the night. Tova Noel was there with an unnamed guard number 1. And it was because there's never, ever just one guard there. There's always at least 2. So there was an unnamed guard number 1 and the mention of an unnamed guard number 2. Who were they? And why are they unnamed? We know Tova Noel's name and Michael Thomas's name. So who are these people? Were they actually prison guards? Or potentially could they have been someone who killed Jeffrey before the tier was locked up for the night? Because the autopsy showed Jeffrey was dead for at least 2 hours. Okay, but in closer examination of the photographs, Jeffrey was relatively clean shaven.
Now, why is that important? You and I spoke about this. Why is that important?
Well, because it can help determine when he was killed. Or when he died, let's put it that way. Because in prison, they bathe and shower Monday and Wednesday and Friday afternoons. So we have to assume Jeffrey washed up and shaved Friday afternoon. Now, if he was found at 6:30 in the morning and he was only dead for the 2-hour minimum that we know he was dead, that would be 4 something in the morning. So if he shaved in the afternoon, by 4 the next morning, he should have more of a beard stubble on his face. He doesn't. He's relatively clean shaven, which leads us to believe that he died a lot earlier in the night. So maybe it's when they locked up the tier. Maybe he was killed then.
Well, there's also been this garbage about that there's a central locking system, but that was put in afterwards. These are the old time key lock, right? Anyone could have a key, could get into a prisoner's cell, right?
Yeah, that's my understanding. And I was also told by another source a long time ago that cell doors were left unlocked that night. And another person verified that they weren't surprised to hear that, somebody with some knowledge. So, you know, if cell doors were left unlocked and somebody was planted in there to, you know, take Jeffrey out, they could have taken Jeffrey out, went back to their cell, and then they transferred out in a couple of days. Another fallacy in the Justice Department report, they try to make it sound, they said that Jeffrey's cell could be seen from 3 other cells, you know, trying to make it sound like it would be impossible for someone to get there. But if you look at the photographs of the cells, the doors have very narrow windows, maybe about 6 inches wide by maybe 2 feet high. So if you were in the cell opposite Jeffrey's and you were standing behind the door, you could see his cell. But if this took place in the middle of the night, the inmates would be in their beds. They wouldn't be able to see out the door. And the other 2 doors that might have visibility to Jeffrey, in order to see his cell door, you'd have to stand right behind that door and look sideways out of that window to look down the corridor to see Jeffrey's cell door. Again, in the middle of the night, no one's going to be doing that. You know, and they were trying to make it sound like, oh yeah, 3 cells could see his cell, and not really. You know, unless you were standing behind the door very close and craning your neck to look sideways. Yeah, it's just, again, it just doesn't make sense. There's just so much of this that, if it was a suicide, like you mentioned earlier today, most suicides are transparent. It's pretty clear. And the question here, there's just so many questions that, it's beyond reason.
And I say that as an attorney who's handled. I've had clients pre-conviction who have killed themselves, who have died by suicide in jail, and then one, Aaron Hernandez, everyone knows, who hung himself up. And Aaron, by the way, was a model prisoner. He was in for a murder, but he was found not guilty of the two murders, two homicides afterwards when we represented him. And he had privileges to go into unlocked cells. There's certain prisoners would have privileges. And I knew that from representing him and from representing other clients. It depends on, if you're an honor prisoner and you can go downstairs, you can have a hot plate, a hot pot, and walk around. So what people necessarily think that everything is just completely locked up is not necessarily the case especially when you're a detainee and you haven't been convicted of anything.
Yeah, you can also pay for special privileges.
Yep. Been there with clients.
There are just so many issues here, Mark. Back to your point about who could see or not see what was going on in neighboring cells. That assumes there were people there. That assumes they hadn't already secreted these people out of the area, so that maybe if they had the possibility of seeing something, they wouldn't be there to see anything. And there's nothing that I've seen that confirms to me that people were there. There's a lot of stuff missing, a lot of tape missing, a lot of guards sleeping, but not enough that would convince me that anybody was there to see what could have been happening in that cell.
Well, I think there were other prisoners in those other cells, because there were like 11 or 12 prisoners. So I think those cells did have prisoners, but if they were sleeping in their cots, like I said, unless they were standing right by their door in the middle of the night trying to see Jeffrey's door, they wouldn't see anything. And if you wanted to pass their room, all you have to do is just duck down, because the windows are about 4 feet off the ground. So it wouldn't be hard to sneak around there, especially at night when people are laying down in their cots. You just stay low. No one's going to see you from any cell.
Yeah, I think Michael wants to. You have another.
Which one did you want to share? I got a few of them here. Do you have one in mind?
I think he wanted the one with Joe Rogan, right?
Yeah, let's do that one. I find that interesting for a couple of points. Let me ask first, though, Mark, did you look at, maybe not the whole 10 hours of video they've released, but the significant, supposedly important moments? Have you looked at that?
I saw something just before, but first of all, they showed somebody there. I tried to blow it up, and I'm not convinced that was Jeffrey to begin with.
Get your point.
I watched it. The first time I watched it, Mark, I said, that could be my grandmother. I mean, yeah. I don't, what is that? It's a shape, it was brutal.
Okay, so do you have that teed up too, Michael?
Somebody mentioned
I don't have that one teed up.
Jeffrey was about 6 feet tall. So, if it looked like somebody who was short, well, that certainly wasn't Jeffrey.
We didn't get anything unless they, quite frankly, I'm surprised they didn't make up a tape and say, oh, look, we found the footage from the tier that night. We found them being moved into the infirmary. We found them taken from the infirmary to the ambulance. They have none of that. None. Zippo.
Right.
And I think what Mark is most embarrassing is that the reliance on it, this holier than thou approach. This is it. This is the Holy Grail. We have found it. This explains everything. It is so unbelievable. Why not just say this is what we've got? It may not answer all the questions. Quality is a little questionable, but this is it. But to rely on it and to stake their reputations, whatever that may mean, on this is it. This answers our questions. What do you think about that?
I think you mentioned the word reputation. The reputation's in the toilet, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and there's everyone understands that there's a lot of people out there. Especially, I know we have separated the list, and I did the same thing this morning. I said the list is like show and tell for people, because everyone wants you. They want you to talk about the list. There's a list. Whether there's a list, there's no list. There's a list. There's no list. They don't want you to talk about this. And if you keep talking about the list, and you're basically talking about something that doesn't really count in terms of discovering whether or not there was transparency, there was a conspiracy, there was a cover-up, and whether there was a murder here of your brother.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I don't get involved with the case, but just off the cuff comment about the supposed list. I think if there was a list of people that were involved with some sexual activity with these girls, with all the victims out there, the hundreds of victims, somebody would have dropped a name and somebody would have said, I was forced to sleep with X, Y, and Z. That hasn't happened as far as I know. To keep all these hundreds of young women victims, mum about who they might have been with. This doesn't, again, it doesn't pass the laugh test. Somebody would say who it was. You don't need the government to have a list. And where did the government get the list from? Who told them? So whoever told the government that this potential list, they would have the information. They can let it out. They're not prohibited from.
Right, and of course they would never give it to all the victims and say, here's a list of everybody of all of you. Let's just share the list. I mean, they're never going to do that. I mean, it's just not going to happen. And if there is a list, you're going to keep it secret if you're somebody. And of course, you could have a list that is in somebody's head. I mean,
that's just it. I'm not getting bogged down by the concept of list. I think that's too literal. I think there may be content somewhere that's been memorialized, but that's a different story. Mark, I want to ask you this, because nobody knows more about what the evidence is, what the evidence isn't, than you do. And again, we're talking to Mark Epstein, the brother of Jeffrey Epstein, in light of the revelation. I saw one outlet said bombshell by blah blah. Bombshell. It was like a dud. Call it a bombshell. Mark, what do you think happened?
Well, I think he was killed, and realistically, looking at it, either he was killed by the guards, this unnamed guard number one, unnamed guard number two, we don't know who they are, a potential that they could have killed him before they locked the tier up, or somebody was planted on the tier to kill him, and cell doors were left unlocked. They got into his cell, they killed him, went back into the cell, and then they were transferred out. That's why we're trying to get the list. We'd like to know who were the other prisoners on that tier, when did they get there, and where are they now? Like I said, Taglione was there for a long time, so obviously he wasn't planted there to do anything to Jeffrey, and we still know where he is. So scratch him off the list. But who are the other unnamed prisoners or inmates on the tier that night? We can't get that.
And do you think they, if this happened that way, were acting on their own or at somebody else's direction, payment, what?
No, I think somebody either paid him, or it could have been a covert operation. He could have taken out the black ops thing. If the people in the government, someone in the government might have wanted him to take him out because of what he knew.
It was awfully convenient. That's all we could say. Now, for those of us who are watching, because we're going to be sharing this video too, and Mark is the best spokesperson for, he wants to find out what had happened. Whatever you think of Jeffrey Epstein, this is Mark's brother, and it has implications beyond Jeffrey Epstein. It has implications about the government, transparency, about hiding things, about being secret, things that we just saw in the Karen Reed case, so to speak, and all. But if you have a tip, and you were one of the detainees, I mean, just email us at JusticeServedTV at gmail.com, and we'll keep your email secret, except from Mark. We'll be discussing it with him. Let us know if you have any leads, because if you're in that position, you'd want the same help that we're asking you out there to give Mark Epstein.
Yeah, if anybody knows who the inmates were, let us know.
It's got to be frustrating, Mark, and we really appreciate the time spent to kind of express some of that frustration at this latest disclosure of nothing from the government. What a surprise. Government lets us down again.
My life would have been a lot easier if I believed that this was a suicide, because I could have dealt with my brother's remains and moved on with my life, losing a brother, obviously. But it doesn't seem to be the case.
Yep. And I know you're in it for the long run until you find out the truth. And what's very interesting is in all this, Joe Rogan obviously made some nice comments about Michael. Pam Bondi worked with Michael on the Anderson case down in Florida. I think that they respect his opinion on a personal basis, but there's something more going on here that maybe that we can surmise, but that we don't know exactly. Because quite frankly, if there's nothing going on, we're going to put this list of questions that Mark has addressed, we're going to put it up, and we're going to go over it before the end of the show, so everybody has this list of questions. And if you can help answer them, please do, because the government's report, by the way, that, as I said, didn't take off the metadata. By the way, if you looked at the 2-page report and you go to PDF it says final_draft_E. By the way, you've done a lot of things you haven't shown us, but you can't take off the metadata for the document. But certainly this is not a commitment to transparency. And we're going to stay on it, right, Michael Bryant?
You bet. We definitely will. And could not have learned from a better source what the family has or has not been told. So, Mark, again, thank you so much. We appreciate you helping us follow this case.
I'm glad you're interested. Thank you.